right, guys, welcome back to another video. It's been a crazy couple of days with gaming news and Xbox news. And one of the things that has been kind of flying a little bit under the radar has been the Xbox Activision Blizzard acquisition. But there was some big news today going on between the FTC versus Microsoft, and the FTC potentially going to be filing an injunction to go ahead and block this deal and bring it to court before Microsoft is going to be able to close on July 18th. So Microsoft, as we know, were planning on going ahead and closing this deal. The July 18th would have been the deadline unless something happens, and this is what's going on right now with the FTC. So first of all, there was this here in the news a couple of days ago where I didn't make a video about it, but it was about the CMA meeting with the FTC 26 times to discuss Microsoft's Activision merger. This is from CEO Sarah Cardell. It says here, Sarah Cardell, the Chief Executive Officer of the UK's Competition and Markets Authority Merger Control Agency, clarifies how many times it had contacted the Federal Trade Commission in the US to discuss the Microsoft Activision merger. Both the FTC in the United States and the CMA in the United Kingdom believe the $68.7 billion Microsoft Activision merger should be blocked. As we know, obviously the CMA has blocked the deal. They're going through the appeals process right now. The FTC sued to block the deal, and they could be heading to court anytime, with August 2nd right now as the court date that we do know about. But those are the two major regulatory bodies that are against this deal in terms of trying to make sure that it doesn't go through. The EU approved this deal. There were remedies, but there was also 39 other countries that went ahead and approved this deal, and many of them unconditionally. It's right now a battle between Microsoft and the United States and Microsoft and the UK. So they say here, some went so as far to allege collusion between the FTC and the CMA. Bobby Kotick talked about this. He was saying how they met many times, and we can't prove what they talked about in these meetings. But he was essentially saying they may have potentially talked about coming to these decisions to block this merger. But the US obviously are coming out and saying there was no collusion whatsoever, and that they didn't even talk about the Activision Blizzard acquisition, and that the accusations were flatly untrue. And when it comes to this type of stuff, these are all just accusations. We will never know what they talked about. We will never know if they actually talked specifically about this acquisition. They're probably no way that proof is going to come out unless maybe there's a whistleblower. If they did collude together to try to block this deal, if they come out and they provide this information. But the reality of the situation is people believing that there is some sort of collusion and that this is going to help with this deal going through, or that information is going to come out that they did collude to try to block this deal. I don't think that's ever going to happen. We'll never actually know what they did talk about. So it's kind of almost pointless to, I guess, theorize about that, because I don't think it will have an effect on the official outcome at the end of the day. But I mean, a betting man, they're both blocking the deal. They met 26 times. I would not be surprised if the Activision Blizzard acquisition did come up. Now, today we got some even bigger news that is getting people more deeper into the hole that the CMA and the FTC are colluding together. It says here, and this is from CNBC. This is a report that just came out today. Pretty big report saying the FTC will try to block Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard. And basically what they are trying to do here is they are set to file for an injunction seeking to block Microsoft's proposed acquisition, and that they have already sued to block the $68.7 billion acquisition, bringing the case to internal administrative law judge. And by filing an injunction, the FTC is seeking to stop the acquisition from going through before the deal's July 18th deadline. Because there are reports out there that Microsoft was going to try and close this deal before the 18th deadline, even without the CMA's approval. They were just going to go ahead and close it. But now with this here, if this injunction, I guess, does get granted, they won't be able to do that. They're going to have to go out and fight in court against the FTC, which is going to prolong this entire thing. It says, by filing for an injunction, the FTC is seeking to stop the transaction from going through before the July 18th deadline, and that the FTC had already sued to block the deal, choosing to bring the case before its internal administrative law judge. Through the trial-like process, the judge would make an initial decision that could be appealed to the full commission for a vote. After that, Microsoft could appeal to a federal court should the decision not go its way. The case is set to go before the administrative law judge in August, and an appeal of the UK's Competition and Markets Authority decision to block the merger is also scheduled to take place this summer, shortly after the acquisition deadline. Now, specifically, Brad Smith has this to say. They're very confident. Before we go through this, Microsoft is very confident that if they go to court, they're going to be able to beat the CMA. They're going to be able to beat the FTC. So all of this stuff is really just, in Microsoft's mind, wasting their time. And that's probably the point of this entire thing from these regulatory bodies, to prolong this thing, to get them to spend more money and spend more time on this thing where they will eventually just tap out. But I don't see Microsoft doing that. Brad Smith says this: "We welcome the opportunity to present our case in federal court. We believe accelerating the legal process in the US will ultimately bring more choice and competition to the market." Essentially saying, yeah, let's go to court because we're going to win. That's basically what he's saying there, if you're reading in between the lines. So they're very confident. And I think the FTC and all this stuff is really just to try to get them to tap out and prolong and spend more money and get more lawyers and all of that stuff that they enjoy doing. Now, we also have this here, which is CNBC and their analysis here. We'll listen to this video. We'll listen to what they say so you guys can understand what they're thinking about this injunction and what the outcome could be.
If this were to go to court, I think the odds are in Microsoft's favor to be able to prove its case against the FTC. That, at least, is according to virtually all the legal experts that I've been able to talk to over time. And in the same way that Amgen feels very strongly it will prevail, should it come to it, for its acquisition of Horizon, which also is being opposed by the FTC. So, yes, what it has done is chilled the market for M&A. It is literally the first thing you hear from every practitioner as to why companies are thinking twice. Even if they think they can prevail, the time it would take, the difficulty, the distraction, the expense, all adds up to fewer deals, at least right now, until and unless the FTC gets soundly beaten in court, which could change people's approach.
Okay.
So there you have it. As he says here, it's the expense, it's the time. Basically, it's why they're doing this. But Microsoft, from everything we've heard and seen from them so far, they're just going to go ahead and fight this thing. I mean, they're a massive company. They have those resources to do that. And I'm sure it does hurt them at the end of the day, more so than if this went through without any pushback. But I'm sure they can actually take on that load to go ahead and fight this thing in court. And from the arguments that we have seen, and like he said, talking to legal experts, I mean, I haven't talked to legal experts, but reading the legal experts' analysis on the internet, it does sound like Xbox, Microsoft do have the case here to win. So we'll see what happens when this thing does go to court. Maybe the FTC has some information up their sleeve that nobody knows about that will give them that upper hand, which would end up this deal at the end of the day being blocked. But 39 countries have already approved this deal, already pushing way in the favor of Microsoft. And then you also have the EU, which I'm sure the CMA and the FTC were hoping they could lean on to help with their case. Didn't go their way. But we will continue on here because Florian Mueller does a big breakdown of what all of this means. So all of the articles, I mean, there's a lot here. I'm going to go through, I think, the important parts in terms of what does this preliminary injunction actually mean, and has it gone through? According here to Foss Patents, first of all, he says, after the CNBC story, it really looks like the FTC's motion for a temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction is given and will be filed today. But then he also continues on here saying that, so in a first step, the FTC needs to find a temporary restraining order. So this is different than a preliminary injunction. And what is that? It's like a mini preliminary injunction, and it can have the effect of a preliminary injunction, but only for 2 weeks or more if the enjoined party accepts it. But in this case, here, time is of the essence, and I doubt Microsoft would accept to be enjoined for more than the standard period. And it is easier to get a temporary restraining order than a preliminary injunction. Because of a temporary restraining order, it's basically sufficient if the court wants to at least have 2 weeks to get some briefing and hold a hearing. And if the deal closes, the whole TRO PI process is pointless. The FTC could keep suing, but it can no longer prevent closing after the fact. And then after those 2 weeks of the TRO, a TRO must either be replaced by a PI, which is a preliminary injunction, or it goes away. So this is kind of where this process is. The PI hasn't been filed yet. And specifically, he goes on here and says, there are some headlines and quotes out there. For instance, The Verge says the FTC will file an injunction, but what the FTC can do is just ask for an injunction. So they would have to file a motion for an injunction first before it gets granted, I believe. And they say that Microsoft welcomes the motion, but doesn't actually welcome the injunction because, again, they go to court, they spend all the money, they spend all the time and resources. I'm sure they do want to avoid that. So there are many ways this can actually go. And if they fail to win a preliminary injunction, basically he says here, it's finished with respect to this merger. If it doesn't even get to a TRO, that will be an even bigger L. So I think he is thinking that it will potentially get to a preliminary injunction, but it just hasn't gotten there yet. And we haven't seen the report come out where they've been granted the motion for a temporary restraining order or the preliminary injunction and all of that type of stuff. We haven't officially seen it. These are all just reports saying that it looks like the FTC is going to do that. So we'll see what happens. They're probably going to have to end up going to court and battling this out. I think Microsoft is very, very confident about this deal. If they do go to court, I think that they believe they have the statistics, they have the analysis, they have the better lawyers to be able to beat these governing bodies, to be able to beat the FTC. And obviously right now with the CMA going through the appeals tribunal. And there is one more thing here that Phil Spencer came out and talked about this deal again, and specifically talking about how they want this deal for mobile. This isn't anything new. We've seen this multiple times. But here's Phil Spencer with Bloomberg, and he gives us some interesting insight, stuff we've already heard about, but he goes further into this entire process.
Of course, the big elephant in the room is what you might still be buying, Phil. And with 27, other games coming on tap, as you say, more than 10 being produced internally by your own game studios already. Does this mean that you kind of don't need Activision Blizzard?
And the thing that's always been unique to us when we've looked at Activision Blizzard King is the capability they have on mobile. And I know it gets lost sometimes, but the largest gaming platform in the world are people playing on their mobile phones. Activision Blizzard, through their acquisition of King, through the growth of Candy Crush, through the growth of Call of Duty Mobile, the work that they've done with Blizzard on mobile devices, that was the thing that really attracted us to Activision, was actually the work that they're doing on mobile. And I'm encouraged by that. If Xbox is going to achieve its goals of being a global gaming platform for the over 3 billion people who play video games, we need to be relevant on mobile and on console and on PC, and we think Activision is an important part of that.
So, I mean, there you have it. When he's talking about the expansion into mobile gaming, I mean, after the showcase on Sunday, yesterday, I believe him. I believe like they are looking at Activision more so for the mobile side of things, because that's really where they are lacking. You look at the games that Xbox has coming out over the next year or so, it's phenomenal. Their lineup is absolutely phenomenal. And there are way more games in the works that we still haven't seen. Like just think about the Perfect Darks and the State of Decay's 3s and everything else that they have in the works coming from Bethesda, where's Wolfenstein, like all of these games, right? They're still in the works. They are going to be getting developed and getting made. They are going to be completely fine on PC and on console, whether they have Activision Blizzard or not. I do believe on the mobile side of things, this will greatly help them. And when he says this is why they're doing this acquisition, it does make sense with Candy Crush, with Call of Duty Mobile, with Diablo Immortal, and any of the other mobile games out there that are popular from these developers. So if you're an Xbox fan and you're hoping that this is mainly for the development and bringing out games for the console and that they need this in order to survive, that just isn't the case. They're going to be completely fine if this deal does not go through at the end of the day. And Phil continues on here talking about the entire battle with the CMA and with the FTC.
Battle, though, it is really hard to change hearts and minds on the CMA. Do you think you can do that, particularly with the news we understand that Activision itself is going to be granted permission to intervene in the legal dispute?
I've been involved in this process now for over a year. It's been a learning experience for me. And I reflect on our process with the European Commission, where we spent a lot of time listening to concerns, coming up with solutions that met the needs of the regulators. And as you know, we received approval in the European Commission. If you include the countries of Europe, we have approval, I think, in 40 plus markets right now globally. You mentioned we're going to focus on the UK. We're going to focus on the US with that same approach. We want to listen to the concerns. We want to come up with active solutions that we believe we can implement and come to a good outcome for us. And we remain confident that we can do that.
And that's interesting because when we think about the FTC, one of the reports that did come out, and Florian Mueller actually highlights that here, is they tried to meet with the FTC multiple times and the FTC really wanted nothing to do with this, which they would obviously be meaning to come to some sort of agreement where they can work together to get this deal approved. And that would be with all of the remedies that they would be wanting to push through. It says here, as I mentioned in another tweet today, Microsoft also wanted to work out a remedies deal with the FTC. They approached the FTC again after the EU clearance decision, but the FTC didn't want to talk, as MLEX reported at that time. At the early January hearing, I mentioned before, the FTC usually said they would be prepared to talk about remedies at the appropriate time. They will look really bad now. So again, this is what Foss Patents is saying. This is what Florian Mueller is saying. And I mean, when I go through Foss Patents stuff, you got to keep it in mind. People believe he is extremely biased. I think that he's actually done some good reporting and making it very easy for people to understand what is actually going on here. So I'm just kind of reiterating and reading through the stuff that he says. But that's what we've seen. That's what we've seen, right? That they've tried to meet with the FTC. The FTC doesn't want to talk with them. They just kind of went ahead and are doing everything they can to go ahead and block this deal. And he finishes up this part of the interview. We'll just listen to what he says.
If, and I'm sure this is an awful thing to have to think about, but everyone's got to think about all the outcomes. If you don't get it, what is your future for mobile gaming? Will you build internally? Is it about other acquisitions?
It could be about both. I mean, we're definitely building internally now. We have more Xbox users on mobile than we've ever had, but we're so small. And obviously, in mobile specifically, you have two big companies in Apple and Google that really control every game that somebody sees on those platforms and all of the monetization. So for us to achieve our goals globally, we are going to have to find a way to build more presence on mobile. We think ABK is a great way to increase competition in the gaming market, given that the largest gaming platform, mobile, is controlled by two other companies. So we think it's a benefit, but it is not the strategy unto itself. The strategy itself, finding new players, finding creators. We have more games being built on Xbox than we've ever had in our history right now. And that mix of millions of players finding all of these games that creators are building is the magic of what we have with Xbox, and we need to extend that to mobile.
So I find that very interesting as he again goes ahead and mentions that there's two players. There's Apple, there's Google that control everything in the mobile gaming space. And one of the things Xbox has talked about wanting to do here is build their own Xbox Mobile, so to go ahead and compete with Apple and Google. And to me, if you're a regulator out there looking at that, I don't see how that is a positive for the overall competition in the gaming market. I mean, mobile is a major part of the gaming market, whether you partake in it or not. I don't really play any mobile games, but I fully understand from that business side of things where Xbox is coming from. And even PlayStation is going that way too, as they have opened up that PlayStation Mobile division. Mobile is going to be a thing that these companies know. It's probably cheaper to make games. It's far easier to reach people because everybody has a phone, and it makes the most amount of money because it's really easy to just tap buy over and over and over again and just keep pouring out money to these developers and publishers. It's almost addicting in a way when you're playing some of these games. So they know that, and they know that they're going to be able to make a ton of money. And I think the company that is the strongest in mobile is going to have a major advantage going forward in terms of every other part of their business by getting more money from mobile and then reinvesting it into the console market and into the PC market and all of that type of stuff. So really interesting stuff. We will see what happens with the preliminary injunction. And if it does go to court, I'm sure that will be extremely interesting to follow, to see how Microsoft fares, how the FTC fares, and who ends up winning at the end of the day. As of right now, I have no idea who is going to win. You have people on both sides going back and forth, people thinking that Microsoft has the better case, others thinking that now the deal is going to be dead in the water if this happens. So we will just have to wait and see. But I will leave the video there, guys. If you did enjoy this video, make sure to hit that thumbs up. If you are new here, hit that subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.
We'll be right back.